Hello, everyone. Welcome back to our series called Changemakers for the Give Black, Give Back. If you guys are familiar with our series, you know that we do a bi-monthly segment where we talk about issues or opportunities in philanthropy specifically, but we've decided to sort of expand that to really talk to some people in the community who have been change makers in our community. So blackgivingback.com is how you find out more about what we do and how we do it. I'm joined today with Kia Jarman as my co-host. You guys have seen her before. If you haven't, you should definitely check her out. And then as well, we have Dwight Lewis today. And Dwight Lewis is a journalist in the area. He has a long history in looking at the civil rights, and he's worked for the major newspaper here. He's an author, he's an educator, he's a TSU grad. So, I mean, he must be a pretty good guy if he went to TSU. So we're gonna give him that. But today we're gonna just find out a little bit more about him, what he's doing, what he's up to, and hopefully gain some wisdom. If we take his advice, it sounds like we're gonna be in a good path. So, Mr. Lewis, thank you so much for joining us today. Key and I are really honored to be here, as well as the Community Foundation to support, just kind of touching base with you. So I want to first of all just say thank you for coming and welcome to the platform.
Thank you all for inviting me.
You're welcome. So I was looking up a little bit information about your career in particular, and being a journalist, you had to always be ready, right? That was sort of your thing. Like, news doesn't happen, it doesn't telegraph it to you. I mean, sometimes you can probably see it. So what were some things that you did that keep you always being ready? Like, how were you able to sort of just always be ready?
Well, when I first went to the Tennessean newspaper, started working there in March of '71. A city editor told me, said, Dwight, this is not a 9-to-5 job. Don't expect to come to work 9 o'clock in the morning, get off at 5 o'clock all the time that you're working. And they said, when you work for a newspaper, consider yourself married to it. And sometimes I had to go to the office, go in the office or call in. They said, where are you? We have a photographer and some money waiting for you. They have in the prison work stoppage down at Fort Pillow. You got to get on a plane in 30 minutes, or they having the guards are going on strike at Brushy Mountain in East Tennessee. I need you to go with a photographer up there. You may not, you wouldn't come back the same day. So you just had to be ready. And I think that's what we have to do in life. We don't know what's coming all the time.
Yeah, it's very good advice. Very good advice, Kia.
Yeah, I'm going to jump in because I've long admired you and your career. And we designate philanthropy as time, talent, treasure, or testimony. And so you've been the capturer and the narrator of lots of testimonies. Share with us maybe one or two of those stories that were most impactful to you that you captured in your career. So that may, of course, require you to go into the archives, because I know you have a lot of stories. But what are some of those testimonies that you could share of other people in our history that you knew were most impactful?
Well, some are different, and there were the John Lewises and the C.T. Vivians and those people. But then there were stories. There was a young lady, I think 16-year-old young lady who was shot to death during a robbery at the Bank of America over on Blakemore one Saturday evening. And just to, that case, and to see her mother at her funeral go up to the casket and bend over and give the young lady a kiss. And then the violent stories, people losing their lives, and the mothers and fathers who were there to have to observe that, to go, bury their young children. And so those stories are touching. There have been some when you might talk to a person who's been accused of shooting his estranged wife and her boyfriends on two different nights. And then police say, well, he wants to kill his kids. And you go talk to him and get him to turn himself in. Stories like that. But whatever stories that you can, when you work for a newspaper or television station, as a reporter or as an editor, I think our main job is to make the city or the place, city where you live, state where you live, or even this world, if you can, a better place to live.
Yeah, I appreciate you for being that narrator, creating humanity in places where people aren't always humanized. And you just shared that in some of those stories. And we know in the Black community, which is a lot of what Lisa and I have been working on, is memorializing those stories. And you really started that path here in the city. So we appreciate you for that. Lisa, do you have some additional questions?
But let me just say this, you know, there were others who paved the way for me and people like yourselves. You know, I think of the late Robert Churchwell, who was the first Black newspaper reporter for a so-called mainstream newspaper. He worked for the Nashville Banner, went to work around 1954, 53. Bill Reed, the late William Reed, who worked for the Tennessean, was the religion news editor, news writer. And there was a young man who was my age, a fellow named Reginald Stewart. Reginald is from Nashville, went to Old Pearl High School. He lives in Silver Spring, Maryland now. He became a journalist. And unlike myself, I played around in college too much and didn't finish school on time. But Reggie went to work for the Tennessean before I did. And then he went to Columbia University to grad school. And he came back and went to work for what is now Channel 2. It was Channel 8. It was the ABC affiliate. When I went to work for the Tennessean, one day Reggie called me and said, let's go to lunch. And he came by and picked me up. And we went over to the old I think Casino Royale over on 40th Avenue North. And we sat down and we had lunch. And when we got through having lunch, he said, take your pen out and a piece of paper and take these names down that I'm gonna give you. He gave me some names and some phone numbers. And he said, call these people and tell them that you're working for the Tennessean now if they don't know it. And if they have stories or story ideas, to give you a call. You know, that's the giving black, the giving back. And you know, he didn't have to do that. But he helped pave the way for me. I've never forgotten that. And I think we have to pay it forward. Somebody does something for you, you do something for somebody else to help bring somebody else along.
Yeah, absolutely. You remind me as I was thinking, as you were speaking, about the Nashville Voice, which I just learned about a few years ago, which was I believe our first Black paper here in the city back in the 1920s. And so it's because of those moments that people like you and me and all of us exist in this space to keep telling stories. And so I appreciate you for bringing that full circle.
That's super interesting. So, yeah, first of all, that was a really, poignant point that we're standing on the shoulders of those before us, right? So that is something to always remember. And as part of our initiative is really about how philanthropy can sort of transition past the time that we're physically here on earth, and that monies and resources and time and talent, and even just, knowing the right people can be transferred to the next generation. And that philanthropy is not just always a monetary thing, but just passing that knowledge on is basically what you're talking about from that standpoint. So we definitely appreciate that. And as part of that, we also know that you're an author. And so I want to just kind of touch base with that. And all this, if I remember right, all this happened after you retired. So I was trying to figure out, I was like,
the first book I co-authored, A Will to Win, is a book about Tennessee State's athletic history from the time the school opened its doors in 1912 up until 1983. It came out in 84. And then, but since I retired, we co-authored a book called Temple's Tiger Bells, an illustrated history of the women who outran the world. And James Thrillkill did the artwork, the illustrations for that book. I'm trying to finish a book on Dr. Dorothy Brown, the late Dr. Dorothy Brown. She was the first Black female surgeon in the South. She's a graduate of Meharry Medical College and had an interesting life. Was orphaned when she was 5 weeks of age in Troy, New York, and went on to become a noted doctor.
That's really important, like you said. So sometimes philanthropy is also giving, Black giving back, right? So that one, that in particular thing, Give Black, Give Back, is like when you give to someone, a Black person, that they're going to always continue to give, and you're sort of an example of that. You were given, a leg up or an opportunity, and you took that, and you've definitely started to give back, and so hopefully we can continue to follow your lead. What do you think? One of the things in particular that this entire format is about telling stories. What do you think is important for people to know about maybe becoming an author themselves and writing down these stories and chronicling sort of some of the stories that you're bringing up? What do you think people should know?
I think all of us, everyone has a story, and those stories need to be told. So often, if we don't tell those stories, people who look like us, those stories won't get told. I have had friends. I had a white female friend once, and she and her husband lived in a house. Anyway, the landlord told them, or at least told the young lady, Black people have never contributed anything to this country. And she and the young lady asked me, Dwight, what if Black people contributed to? And it's just people need to know our stories. We help build this nation, and they need to know those stories. I regret one of the stories that I did not tell, and I've been lucky, had a chance to meet a few presidents, a couple of presidents, meet noted people, but I did not interview my father before he died, and my father served in the Marine Corps during World War II. I have pictures of him. I have his discharge papers when he went to the military or left the military. But I did not sit down and interview him. Those stories, he went overseas, fought during World War II. So I tell young people, especially, interview your relatives, interview your mother and your father or your grandparents. Find out where they came from. So many great stories that don't get told. And I think we just take a tape recorder and listen to their stories. Listen to their stories. So many great stories that are out there for us.
Yeah. Well, you kind of took us to a place where I want to go back a little bit, because I believe what I know about my journalist friends and colleagues is that they're often not the story, right? So not that you haven't been interviewed before, I know you have, but very often you're the one behind the seat asking the questions. I'd love to know, and I'd love for people to know a little more about your story and why journalism was important to you, and why that was your gift that you gave to the world, that of course continues to multiply even now. Those stories we still remember. Tell us about your story and why you wanted this to be your legacy.
Well, my story is, I'm from Knoxville, originally born in Knoxville. A month and a half after I turned 2, my mother died. She was fixing her hair on a hot plate, using a hot plate, and the window was up. Her dress caught on fire, and she died the next morning from injuries. So my father and I moved from Knoxville to a little town up above Knoxville called Strawberry Plains. We lived with one of my mother's sisters and her husband from 1950, mid-1950, until my father remarried in 1955, the fall of 1955. And in 1956, I moved back to Knoxville and went to school there. But the first 3 years, and I'll try to keep it short, I went to a one-room schoolhouse in Strawberry Plains. The school was called Rolling Hill. We had one teacher, and she taught 9 grades. The school went from the 1st to the 9th grade. So I only went to the 3rd grade there, and then I moved back to Knoxville. I wanted to be a Major League Baseball player. I loved the Brooklyn Dodgers growing up. I was a Jackie Robinson and Roy Campanella fan. But as I grew up and got older and played baseball, one of the things I couldn't do, I was not a good hitter. So if you can't hit the ball really good, there's no place for you in Major League Baseball. But when I was in high school, Old Austin High School in Knoxville, I became manager of the school's basketball team, and I traveled with the football team. So, and I would call the results of our games into the Knoxville News Sentinel, the afternoon paper, and to the Knoxville Journal, the morning paper. And so I did that. In my 12th grade year, they had a contest, they picked a winner contest during University of Tennessee's football season. And they had one student from each high school in Knoxville to write a story once a week for about 6 weeks about his or her high school. And I was selected by some faculty members at my high school to do that for Austin. And my teacher happened to be my English teacher, my senior year, was a lady named Alfreda Delaney, or my homeroom teacher at least, Alfreda Delaney. And if you look at any of Nikki Giovanni's books, sometimes she pays tribute to Miss Delaney. Miss Delaney was a great lady, taught Nikki. Nikki went to Austin in Knoxville. And so I did that, but I would call the games into the News Sentinel and so I just loved journalism and would read the paper every day. My parents would get the morning paper and the afternoon paper. So I just fell in love with the newspaper. And when since I wasn't going to the major league, and so when I got to Tennessee State, I joined the staff of the Meter, the student newspaper. And I did that, and traveled some with the basketball team, look all the scores in. So that's how I got into. I lucked into a job at the Tennessean and went from there.
Mm-hmm. So much of your story is about education, and we spoke with Miss Perry, and she had a similar story in terms of education being so central. What would you say to those young people at the Meter? What is your message to them about journalism, but also contributions to the world? What would you share with them?
I would tell them to have dreams and to don't let anybody tell you that you can't do what you want to do. You can't be what you want to be. You can be it. Don't let anybody say, well, you go to Tennessee State because you go to Tennessee State or because you go to Fisk, you can't be a great journalist or you can't be a great doctor. Don't let anybody knock you down. And I tell them to listen to people, to talk to others, to help build bridges. Bring somebody along with you. Reach back, because we didn't get where we are by ourselves. We had someone to help us.
That's amazing. It seems like you've been given a lot of opportunities and taken a lot of opportunities yourself when they weren't necessarily put in front of you, working with your English, your homeroom teacher, Miss Delaney, and the gentleman, working with different people. So as a philanthropist, could you tell us a little bit about your first experience of sort of giving, as far as and when you knew you were a philanthropist? Like, tell us a little bit about that story.
Well, I haven't gotten there yet.
Okay.
However, when I got ready to retire from the Tennessean, and I know this is very important, I've known that for a while. When I got ready to retire from the Tennessean, someone, Mike Piggott, who used to work for the Banner and worked for McNeely, Piggott and Fox, PR firm, Mike said, "Well, Dwight, you've got to have a retirement party." I said, "Mike, I cannot have a retirement party. My wife was sick at the time. She's deceased now." But he said, "Well, you got to have a retirement party." And I said, "No." So he said, "Well, at least do this. Let's have a celebration and let's raise money." We will say, let's raise money for a Dwight Lewis Scholarship Fund at Tennessee State for journalism. And we did that one night over at the Freedom Forum. This was back in, I think, first part of October of 2011. And so I got to put more money into the scholarship fund.
So you have a scholarship. So then you've given back so many different ways in particular. So philanthropy, we try to talk about specifically money is one way, and that is obviously an amazing way. And you have a scholarship. So I'm going to call that a philanthropy. So say 2011. And then there's so many other ways that you've given back as well. Knowing that that's there, what does that mean to you?
It means that to me, it means that there will people tomorrow be in place to do some of the things that I did, and not only do what I did, but they'll do it better. They'll do it much better.
Right, because they had the opportunity, and that's what we kind of talk about with philanthropy, specifically being really an opportunity to sort of have that legacy of giving in a more structured way. As our community, African Americans, and even Africans across the diaspora, we talk about specifically how giving is in our DNA. It is what we've done, is what we've always done. We've always had that person who brought over food when someone passed away. We've always had that person who, gave a little bit of money for you to, get the Easter dress or whatever the thing was that you needed. Maybe baseball. I'm sure somewhere along the way, someone, gave a little extra money to do that. And so those are ways that we're trying to normalize philanthropy and take on. That's a big word, but I believe that we have people who have already filled those shoes and just making sure they fit in there. So thank you for sharing that. And now that we know that there's a scholarship there, we'll definitely hopefully connect you up with Community Foundation and see if we can help you get some more funds in there to get some more people out there telling the story. So thank you for agreeing to have a scholarship in your name.
Thank you all.
We were on a panel earlier this year talking about civil rights in relation to the media, and I was representing the Banner and Dwight, the Tennessean, and Yamiche Alcindor, who's now on PBS. She covers the White House. And the fact that one of her regrets was she'd never talked to Emmett Till's mom. And then Dwight waits till she finished and said, I did talk to Emmett Till's mother. And just started, and I'm getting chill bumps talking about it now. But Dwight's, I don't know if there's any civil rights leader that's been around the last 40 years, Dwight, that you haven't interviewed. I can't think of any.
Lucky, just got there at the right time.
Yeah,
right time.
You were always ready. That what goes back to you were ready.
Can you talk a little bit about that? What was that conversation like with Emmett Till's mom? I would be really curious.
Well, what happened? It was November, late October. On November 9th, I think, 1989, they held the dedication of the Civil Rights Memorial in Montgomery. And John Sigenthaler was editor of the paper, and he suggested, getting ready to dedicate the memorial. I think we should do a few stories leading up to the dedication. And one story was for me to call, he suggested I call Emmett Till's mother, try to interview her. I got her and we talked about what happened, what she told her son, little Emmett, who was a teenager before he went to Mississippi, what he shouldn't do, what he should and shouldn't do. And then after he was murdered, how she, and you've heard the story, she wanted his casket to be open for the world to see what they did to her son. That was one interview. The second interview was to interview, and I can't think of her name. There was a woman from Detroit, a white woman from Detroit, who was watching television during the 1965 when the Montgomery or Selma to Montgomery March was about to take place. She was watching television and with her children, 2 or 3 children. And she said she saw the bad things that were happening. And she decided she needed to go down to Alabama. And she told her children she was going. And they said, can we go with you? And she said, no, not this time. And I'm sorry, I never forget her name. But she went down, and when the march was over, when they got to Montgomery, going back, she was taking some participants, and the Klan fired a shot into her car. and she died. And there's a marker in between Montgomery and Selma. But I couldn't call her, she was deceased, but I talked to one of her daughters. And I was sitting in the newsroom that particular night when I did the interview. And the daughter told me the story. And I just cried. The other story was to interview John Lewis, Paul Zwerg, and Siegenthaler. Paul Zwerg was a exchange student, white exchange student at Fisk. He came from Wisconsin. He come from Wisconsin. And John Lewis, you know, John's story, he was here in school, and they were freedom riders. And Siegenthaler was working for the Kennedy administration as an administrative assistant to Robert Kennedy, Attorney General. And Paul Zwerg called his family and told them that he was going with the freedom riders. He was a white fellow, young white man. And his father told him, if you go, we'll disown you. And Paul Zwerg went. And when they pulled in Montgomery, they were attacked. And he was one. And his father, you know, disowned him for a while, but later the family patched things back up. So stories like that. I hate I forget the lady's name from Detroit.
I think Audra put in Viola Lizzo.
Yeah,
I think that's what she put in.
Yeah, Paola Luizzo is her name.
Luizzo, okay, Luizzo.
Luizzo.
Okay.
Yeah. And there's a marker, people have defaced it at times, but they put it back up. And so those are stories that, you know, that have to be told, that should be told. And so representatives of those families were there when the Civil Rights Memorial was dedicated on November 9th, 1989.
Yeah, one thing we're going to talk about, I believe, during Black Philanthropy Month, which is in August, is about self-care and that being central to being a philanthropist. You've got to be able to take care of yourself and your mind and your body. And when you carry those stories, you're the carrier of those stories out to the world. How have you been able to take care of yourself, and how do you make sure that you share the stories, but then also you're able to replenish your energy and so forth? How does that work for you?
Well, I guess I do so many other things that, you know, one of the things, I have a lot of tapes. I have some of these people on tape. And so I keep those. But I think at some point I'm trying to figure out what can I do with them? But I think just sharing the stories are good. I've never, I think this is about the first time I ever, you know, cried a little bit but they're good stories, and they were good times. And so you think, you know, there are people, so many stories, so many great stories. So you just, you know, they inspire you. And so you keep it, and you share, you pass it on, and tell people. That's why I tell people, interview interview your family members. We got to know these stories. We can't let them go to the graveyard. But I thank you all. Thank you for what you're doing.
Thank you. It's an honor.
Thank you for doing it. So thank you for, you know, I think the thing is, I think, you know, I wanted to say this. I'm from Louisville, Kentucky, so Muhammad Ali is obviously, you know, the person that we sort of
New documentary out.
He did, yeah. I heard he was very, very, I mean, he's very talkative, so I'm sure it's from that standpoint. But one of the things in particular is, like, you know, I always felt like he was our voice when we didn't have one. Mm-hmm. And so I thank you for being our voice when we didn't have one. Because, you know, Kia, I may have slightly been here. I'm a little older than Kia, but I know Kia wasn't here. But so you were definitely our voice when we didn't have one. So thank you for doing that.
Yes. Well, we're about to wrap, to be mindful of time. I feel like we could probably talk forever about the legacy that you've designed for yourself, but others. And I really appreciate you for being here. Before we go, any last thoughts or words or moments that you'd like to share with the folks who'll be watching?
Just do things, do what you want to do. Dream big. Uh, One of the things, I was in a fellowship program at the University of Michigan, 1981-82 school year. It's a program sponsored by the National Endowment for the Humanities and the University of Michigan. When the program was ending in May of 82, we had an exit interview. Each participant had an exit interview with someone from the National Endowment for the Humanities. And one of the things that this person told me as I was being interviewed, he said, when you go back home, be willing to listen to other people. Be willing to listen. Take time to listen to what others have to say. You know, sometimes we're in so much of a hurry that we don't have time for others, that we think we know it all, but we have to take time to listen to others. And, you know, maybe giving us advice. They may be telling us about a story. When I worked for the newspaper, one of the things that John Siegenthaler told me, make sure you don't have a unlisted phone number. You want people to be able to call you. They may have a story idea. You don't want people not to be able to reach you. You want to be able to be reached, and you want to we have to listen. So I would just urge everybody to listen to one another. Sometimes people are hurting. They have stories to tell. Sometimes they want to tell you about something that's really happened, something good that's really happened to them. But whatever it is, we have to just take time to listen to others. People maybe in different fields. We have to give them somebody else our phone number. Ask them for a phone number, whoever it might be. Julio Jones or whoever it is, Dr. Glenda Glover. Tell them, I won't call you unless it's absolutely necessary. But we have to network and we have to do things that will help move us forward and move others forward.
Thank you.
And now just let me in. I'm sorry.
Oh, that's okay. Go ahead.
I think about the story. There was a basketball player here, a young man who grew up in public housing in South Nashville. Charles Davis went to McGavock High School and went on, played basketball at Vanderbilt, got a scholarship to Vanderbilt, and went on played pro basketball with the Chicago Bulls for one. But I was interviewing Charles, and he told me this once. He said when he was growing up in what many of us call the housing projects, he went to a basketball game over at Cameron High School, across the street at Cameron High School. And there was a player that he just really admired. And he went up to talk to that fellow after a game once. And the fellow told him, get away from me, get away from me. And Charles said he never forgot that. And he promised himself that when he got older and was able to do some things, he would try to give back to young people. And he was able to do that, had some programs here. Charles still lives here. And so those are things that, we can't turn people away. We can't push people off. Sorry to go on and on, but those are things that, you meet people, they tell you their stories. And I've never forgotten that.
Yeah, thank you for that. Philanthropy is so important because, as Lisa mentioned, it's about the treasure, but it's also the time, the talent, and the testimony. And you've certainly helped us and reminded us of how important it is to share our testimonies with each other, share those stories, capture those stories, and then advance ourselves through those stories. So we appreciate you being here for Give Black, Give Back Changemakers series. This is an opportunity for us to share the stories of those trailblazers in our community, and you're certainly one of them, and we appreciate you for that. People can go to blackgivingback.com to learn more about how to give to either Give Black, Give Back or to any of our funds or nonprofits here in our city that are operating to help Black individuals and Black communities. Thank you so much, Dwight Lewis, for being here. We're so grateful for your time, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you very much. Good luck.
Thank you.